long journeys. I'm scared to ask who had the longest one. I've been to Montana, so I can imagine that might be the far ends of the earth in this room. But welcome, Stacey and Anne. Lovely to have you with us, but also Danish from Pakistan and the islands. Just fantastic. So many friends, but as I realized last night as we caught up, so many stories. I thought I'd prepared quite well with detail of what's happening in Regions Beyond. And then I chatted to people last night and thought, we don't know half of what's going on because God is just on the move and you've all been so faithful with your call. And thank you as well for your expectation. That has just been so evident from the very first moment. I was battling to get everyone out the car park last night. I don't know if that means we're arriving or going, but it's really good. But great to be together for these few days. I've, in terms of the program, changed things around a little bit because I felt that what we would normally do is obviously just gather for worship now and prayer and really look to God, which I so enjoy. But because there are a number here who are here for the first time, and we've come from all different contexts, I thought it would be so good just to give you a bit of an overview of what I'm carrying in my heart, what we as a global team are carrying. We've come out of a few days of togetherness into this time. And so just to be able to bring us all to the same place. So there's no one disadvantaged here, but we all feel that we can own it. So thank you so much. And thank you so much to those who've traveled in to come and speak to us and share their hearts. We are truly now a multi-generational movement, and which I'm going to refer to a little bit later. It's lovely to have Terry and Wendy with us, particularly. I was so grateful when you contacted me last year and said, I'm coming to South Africa. Could we do something together? I can't remember your exact words, but it didn't take much thought, and this was born out of your availability and coming to our nation again. Thank you so much. We treasure that. In 1997, in my early days, we'd been here about a year, I had a routine and something I enjoyed so much, and that was to go up the mountain that's behind us here. You can see a little bit through the door, and spend some time in prayer. I found a very nice flat rock. I think some of you have prayed with me there over the years. And it was just my routine at least once a week to go and pray there and just enjoy God and pray over our valley. My vision at the time was for this place. God lifted my eyes to Lesotho. Lovely to have Pete West here, gathering so many in Lesotho. And really pray for the nations, the beautiful views of the Maluti Mountains in the distance and the northern Drakensberg. And below me was our property, our home, my family, a big steel barn where every Sunday some 200 or 300 people would gather from this area, from Lesotho at the time until they closed the border. And we would have outrageous worship and fun and freedom as God was moving quite spectacularly. But it was over those days that God asked me a question. Will you believe me that from what you see below you here in the mountains, you will reach the ends of the earth? And I can remember that moment because sometimes as we start works, as we penetrate into new areas, as we get things going, we're going to talk about Jan Willem and Melinda pioneering into from Penang Island later in the year. And you look at it and you think, yes, Lord, but help me in my unbelief. Because we're not exactly in the center of the world, as you worked out coming from Johannesburg yesterday. And so it was a fair question. Meeting in the barn, we were really a poverty-stricken people. Not many knew the nations or had great geography. We had just come out of apartheid. We were trying to find our way as a new nation. And there was nothing to point to the fact that this could happen except God. Except God. And that cry comes from within, Lord, yes, help me in my unbelief. Give me faith to believe you. The week before Dechlebeng Church was born, we gathered in that big barn. We hadn't cleared it for the meeting because, to be honest, we didn't know what we were going to do at the end of the week. We were still just praying and saying, Lord, how do we go about this church plant? And God spoke to us right there on that Tuesday morning, few days to go before the church plant, and said, I will send people from every direction, from the north and the south, the east, the west, will gather to you in this barn. Prepare yourself for 500 people. Now, there were, I think, 9 of us in the barn praying that morning. And you suddenly think, the 9 of us, the barn's full of old equipment, and there was a haystack in the corner, a few puff adders, which we didn't know about. We found them at the end of the week when we cleared up to get ready. Now, that's a snake, by the way. And God said, this is what I will do. And on that morning, when we woke up, it was a beautiful day. And about 10 o'clock, we're all ready. We'd cleared up the barn. We'd taken all the hay bales and we'd packed them out like we've done here. We had no chairs or anything. We built a stage out of hay bales. So when you walked on it, it was like truly walking on water, because it felt like everything was moving under your feet, the closest I've come to it. And we got ready. And then suddenly came this noise of people arriving, some cars arriving, which was exciting. And then as you looked out, there were people crossing the fields here from every direction. It was just quite spectacular. Those walking, some drove. And then some came on our faith bus called Lazarus, because it had been raised from the dead so many times over the years. And you could hear it coming down the road, you know. And you're thinking, Lord, I hope the brakes are going to work. It's the only one we could find in the area. And then a kind farmer behind the mountain got his tractor and trailers, and he put them and he drove all the way around, and people jumped on. So this tractor load of people arrived. And 550 people joined us that morning from across this area. This morning I was up early. I'm a farmer, so it's a natural thing. And I hadn't seen it until I sat before God this morning. But once again, people have come from the north, the south, the east, and the west. And I sat before the Lord and I thought, wow, you've done it. Not only have you done it, you've done it here. And I'm not sure we'll ever do this again here, by the way. But he's done it. He's brought the nations in. Promises that he gave, dreams we had, and he's fulfilled them. And yesterday, as we gathered on our final morning as a global team, Terry and Wendy and Sam, Marlene, Ray and Sue joined us. We sat here and we just talked and prayed. And I'd asked Terry, would you like to say anything to us, help us, guide us? And I captured what he said to us in one sentence. Exercise faith. Believe his promises and believe him for fresh promises. Are you up for that? Because that's why we are here this morning. We've been positioned in this place to once again dream, to once again stand before God and just gaze and say, Lord, what would you do? The extraordinary. I mean, it's 27 years ago. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I don't go up that mountain so often, by the way. But it's unbelievable. You look what God's done and you think, God, you did it. In July 2011, very special day. I can't remember particularly which day of Brighton conference it was, but Terry laid hands on several of us. And we took what had been entrusted to you and those that you had gathered. And we all prayed for, hands laid, and it was entrusted to us. It was quite a moment. I felt like a bit of an imposter. I represented 8 churches, but it was a very significant time because one could feel the weight of the recognition and the commission. Big shoes to fill, and we all stood and thought, oh Lord, only you. Jesus gathered his disciples and he said to them, he breathed on them and he said, as the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. And so we've gathered at this time in this way, sadly missing a few whom I would really have loved to be here, but there's real life out there. But we've gathered at this time not so much about recognition, that's part of the journey that will come, but it's a time of equipping, of impartation and anointing. Not everyone in this room will have an Ephesians 4 gift, but you'll play your part in this great commission and call we have. And my question to you this morning is, are you ready? Because I don't feel this is any ordinary gathering. This is going to be a real waypoint for us, like a jet flies and then suddenly it hits a waypoint where it changes and you can see it. Those of you who would have gone through a few coming here. I've spoken to a number of you already and said, expect that moment. In this place, at this time, let's be a people of faith. As we sit in this room this morning, we represent some 29 nations that we know about, but as I listened last night to some of the stories, I thought, oh, I don't think we're quite right, because I didn't know we were there and it's happening. But anyway, I confidently say we're in 29 nations. And in these nations, we carry together 190 communities of the Spirit, churches, families gathering as a community. We even have some new ones. We have Piedra Angular. Is that quite good? It sounds a bit different, eh? But it's Cornerstone. That was birthed over the Christmas period. Just spontaneous. Group getting together and say, we can do something. And as I listened last night, I realized, oh, there are quite a few more. Nigel Pereira, not sure where he is. Where's Nigel? Said to me, after Advance, we've got 3 new churches coming through. And I think, wow. And all the work in Nepal through Franco, Nigel and Gurmeet and others. Kim and Smile, I'm scared to speak to you because I can't keep up. In June this year, we get ready to send JW and Melinda sitting over there, who are leaving their beautiful base church in Utrecht, one of my favorite cities in the world, to leave for Penang Island, just on the east coast of Malaysia, as a base that we can start to reach into the east. Funny enough, something Fuzzy said to me years ago. He said, a time's going to come that God will open the east to us. Fuzzy, good prophecy, the time has come. We've got teams. I mean, if you chat to the guys in Dubai, I think 8 or 9 or more teams this year. Lesotho and South Korea, out of Hope Church in Lesotho next week, I think. West Africa, all over. It's just amazing. For us in Africa, we're advancing into Zambia in August. Danish, the work you're doing, chatting to you last night and hearing the works among the poor, just amazing. If you haven't chatted to him, please do that. Take time to chat to Stacy and Anne. I'm so glad you're here. This is very significant. They took a small group and went into an area known as the Bitterroot Valley in the Bitterroot Mountains. Hamilton or Stevensville, I can never remember. Stevensville, I should remember that. And planted a church and had to knock out walls and turn the building and go 2 services. Just a phenomenal work. Robust, growing community. Over this year, brothers and sisters, we have 18 gatherings that we know of as a global team. I'm sure there are others, where families and groups and clusters of churches will get together, with our main one in Dubai in November as we close off the year. We'll give you all those dates while you're here. It's just phenomenal to see. We truly are a movement. We've been living with a word about the new era, where the landscape before us would change, that it wouldn't be what we knew, it would be a different landscape. Rodney, I was looking for it this morning and I'm afraid I didn't find it, but I'd love it if we could revisit it. The prophecy about the new boats that was brought in 2019 for a time that would come. God said, prepare new boats and new strategy because you're going to go to new horizons. And then in December, as we closed off our year, it was a busy one last year. Declaben's been doing very well, and Regions Beyond is spreading so mightily. We were getting ready for the handover that takes place this coming Sunday. Such a joy for us to see Kumbi Nortandeka taking on the mantle of lead eldership or team leader. And I was enjoying a study of the book of Mark and following a fantastic commentary, working through it daily. And on a particular day, I came to Mark chapter 6, so I'd been in there for a while, feeding of the 5,000. Now, as far back as I can remember, my parents forced me to go to Sunday school at a Presbyterian church. And I can remember the story over and over and over again. I've preached it many times since then. I've lived in it. I love it. But I must be honest, I thought, okay, know this one, so we move on. But God put something in my heart. And I thought, you're speaking to me, Lord. Anyway, I pressed on. I went through Mark chapter 6 and then 7 and got to Mark chapter 8. And if you know the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is once again faced with 4,000 to feed. And as I started to read it, I started to realize God reminded me of what I'd been through just a few days or a week or so before. And I suddenly thought, Lord, you did such a miraculous thing. Now, here the disciples again saying, no, man, send them away. How would you ever feed so many people? And God really began to speak to me. How can we feed these people in such a desolate place? The disciples say to Jesus, because his heart has been moved with compassion for these people. And he says they're like sheep without a shepherd. Frizzy touched on that at Declabang this last Sunday. It was so helpful. And I was just about to berate the disciples for their lack of faith when I believe God opened my eyes. 4 things. And I'm sharing these with you because I believe he wants to shape our thinking. 3 things, not 4. The first one, John 6:52, I am the bread of life. He was showing them that he was the manna, the spiritual manna. Once again, massaging it into his disciples. I'm the bread of life. We can't miss that it was in a desolate place, the wilderness, that we see the Moses in Jesus. And if you see it, you see Jesus' ministry coming forth. He's putting it on display. I am the bread of life. Doesn't matter if it's 5,000 or 4,000 and all the others that would have gathered. I am the bread of life. And I feel he wants to remind us about that before we come to prayer and worship. I'm going to press on. He was the bread of life then, and he's the bread of life now. Secondly, Jesus for the Jew and Jesus for the Gentile. In other words, all nations. He is the bread of life for everyone. I had never seen it before, but as I looked at these two together, I hadn't realized that the feeding of the 5,000 plus women and children, many more, was in a Jewish area. And now he was in the Decapolis, the Gentile area. And maybe that's why the Gentiles said, send them away. Sorry, what did I say? Forgive me. Disciples said, how would we ever do this? Don't you know who you were before? And Jesus was saying, I was the bread of life for the Jews, but I want to show you now I'm the bread of life for the Gentiles. And let that remind us, no matter where you are ministering, whether it's a small village, David and Agnes, as we send you next week from Simunye to go and plant in Mzuzu City, Malawi, is the bread of life. All people. Thirdly, and so important for us as we go through transition and change, Jesus' supply always meets and exceeds demand. There's always leftovers, Ray is saying behind me here. Everyone satisfied. The spiritually famished world totally fed. Let's never miss that our Lord has everything this world needs. Pick up the leftovers. Among the Jews, it's quite interesting, 12 baskets left over. Among the Gentiles, 7. Regions beyond, here's the message. As I looked at these two, I felt God say to me, I want to do it again. So easy to be. There's different people in these stories. There's the disciples. There's all the masses. They're the Pharisees. And if you look at all, they all respond differently. But Jesus wants to say to you and I want to do it again. I want to do it again. It's not Terry's story or Terry's team story that we just maintain and carry into the nations. It's not Stephen and Heather's story that we do. He wants to do it again. What I did for Terry and Wendy, I want to do for you. Such a privilege to have the generations here. You'll see that today and tomorrow. What I did for Steve and Heather, I want to do again. What Terry and Wendy and Ray and Sue, Sam and Marlene and many others have experienced, what they achieved is truly phenomenal. It's a great story. And I know as we say that to you, you would point upward and say, yes, he did a great story. I know your heart, Terry. Just listen to them and speak to them over these days. Absolutely incredible. But I believe God wants to say to us, I want to do it again. I'm still the bread of life. I'm still the God of all nations. I still will meet every need and supply everything you need and more. How are we going to do it? We get a little practical and then we're going to prayer. As a global team, we set 4 priorities for us as a movement. Not for this year. We don't work in calendar years. We work as God leads us. And this might be for months. It might be a year. It might be years. But we felt God speak to us about 4 things. Next generation. In other words, sons and daughters. We've got to see them equipped, raised up, and made ready. I chatted to a friend of mine whose worldwide movement imploded, and we were talking about the effects of it, the relational breakdowns, all the stuff. And he said, the biggest pain for me is that my children grew up in an atmosphere, my children grew up without the atmosphere of a worldwide movement. He said, when I was a son and daughter, I was in this movement. The fathers were on the stage. The nations were before us. The music was lifting our spirits. We were going to the nations. Our movement stumbled. My children grew up in my church. Their dad's the only route to the bigger picture. We are privileged to have this, but we've got to have the next generation seeing it and experiencing it and feasting off it if we're going to continue in what's been entrusted to us. Secondly, the unreached. We are not called Regions Beyond because it was a catchy name. It was a call. It was a call. I've called you to go to the regions beyond. And so we want to work with the unreached. In my figures, I think or the report on Regions Beyond, I forgot to mention that at the moment we're working into 17 unreached people groups in this room. 17. And I heard of one other from Fuzzy. So there's probably 18, and there might be others. I thought I was going to get a cheer, Ray.
Yeah.
Okay. You, your people, your money, your prayers, your encouragement are reaching 17 plus unreached people at the moment. Make sure your church know it. Our third priority, the poor. We have had a real bias towards the poor, a pull, a divine pull towards the poor. Not that we neglect the affluent areas of the world or those cities that are great. We go for them as much, but we have a heart for the poor as a movement. It's a calling as well. I listened to Danish last night. He told me about an area where they're hoping to plant a church. And Danish, forgive me, I was a little tired getting ready for this, so I might not get all the facts right. But about a brick-making plant where people have loaned money to get a job and have actually just become slaves. Never get out of there. They'll never earn enough to get their freedom. We have a heart for the poor. We talked about it as a team, and we've got a strategy which you'll hear about. And then very lastly, and I've left this one to last, these are not in order of priority, they're just all priorities. We believe that we need to be very intentional about releasing Ephesians 4 gifts if we're going to maintain our growth and our gospel advance. And that's why you are all here. That we want you to gain understanding, equipping, so it can stir things in your heart. And my dear brothers and sisters, all of this is happening on a journey of transition. Over the COVID time, God started to stir my heart. I was looking at, I can't remember where it came from, but how transition fails and how it succeeds. And one of the things I saw is that when a movement is really going and growing and as one, it is a very good time to transition. In fact, it's the best time. Not when it's reached its pinnacle and then the leader starts to get tired or whatever and you start to decline. Then you hand over quickly and the guy's got the aeroplane heading towards the ground, and he has to pull with all his force to try and resurrect it. You take over the controls. But I want to say this to you. We are not transitioning one leader to another. Will you write that down? We are all transitioning. I'm transitioning into more of a fatherly role. As Heather will tell you, I'm not the retiring type. I'm transitioning into a fatherly role. We need fathers. The global team are transitioning into a movement carrying, gospel advancing role. My dear friend Fuzzy is transitioning into a team leading role, a movement leading role. You are all here to transition into nation carrying roles, church carrying roles, church strengthening roles. We're all transitioning. I'm not as young as I was when I stood up there on the mountain, but many of you are. And if you can catch the heart of what's going to be imparted today, if you can respond, as Terry said, respond with faith. You've got to be a faith movement, was the encouragement. You will get something here to write a story, a Jesus story, not a this one or that one. Because Heather will tell you, we shouldn't have done what we did. This is a Jesus story. That's why we're here. And so over these years, we're transitioning. But it's transitioning for a purpose of continuing to see the gospel go forth. So here we are together. We got the fathers and mothers. We got the brothers. We got the sons and the daughters. We got the apostles. We got the prophets. We have some evangelists. We got the pastor teachers in this room. Soak it in. Soak it in. Many years ago, as I came into the church, I can remember the man Terry sent to us, a sent one, an apostle, Simon Pettit. And I remember listening to him, and I was a businessman at the time, and he got up and started to just gently change the aspect of our church, which was quite inward looking in a way. And he started to lift our gaze. Every time he talked about it, my heart would burn. Until eventually I can remember saying, Lord, whatever that is, put it in here. And he did. We're all transitioning. This Sunday, I transition again as I take something very, very dear. And that's Declabank Church, which is flying. So glad Rodney's with us this Sunday. You're going to be there because he gave me a prophecy at a time where I thought, I do not want to lead the local church again. I've done that. And then the prophet. Steve, God's been talking to me about you. I'm on sabbatical. I don't know why it's happening, but this is what he wants to say to you. I'm going to raise that church up again. It'll dance on the hills of Africa, but you've got to lead it. Mark DuPont. I woke up this morning. I haven't spoken to Mark for quite a long time. And I saw a message on my phone. I had a dream about you, and I thought I should share it. He said, I saw you speaking to a lot of people on 3 consecutive events. Global Team, Legacy, Simunye. He doesn't know about them. And he said, you're going to feel that you're saying the same things over and over again. And you're even going to feel, is anybody listening? Can the bouncers take this guy out, please? Too big, yeah. Oh, you one of the bouncers. And he said, God is with you. His presence, the Holy Spirit, keep telling the people to pursue it. And the call of God. So I was very cheered by his message this morning because I felt this is the same things I've said to you many times. Do they really want to hear it? Let me close. So over these days, we're going to sing together in worship. We're going to encourage one another. We're going to pray for one another. There's no hierarchy here. We're friends before God. They're fathers, their sons, their brothers, their sisters. We're a family. So many stories. And if you think your story is great, go and talk to a few others, and then suddenly you think, wow. Okay. I feel Jesus wants to say to us as we go to worship, I want to do it again. And again. Is that okay? All right. Thank you.